Good morning, Bitcoiners. I hope you're doing well. Pardon the slight delay this morning. B for victory, Bomatan. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Edgar, howdy, howdy, howdy. Christine, good morning, indeed. Lightning Ven, good morning from Minnesota, where Sunrise Tech is working earlier every day. That's true. I was at dinner last night. I got a big boo because Barbados people, Bajans they're called, we're talking about the days getting longer because we're at the equator. The whole spread is like an hour for the whole year. And they're having this conversation. So I kind of laughed at them and they're like, no, it really does change. All right. Come to the north and find out about change in the day, right? All right. Jose, good morning. John, good morning. Matt, hope you're doing well. Thomas, good morning, Nolan. I moved to El Salvador last week. No kidding. Just in time for the Bukele re-election and the Bitcoin mass adoption. Happy I am. What a story, Thomas. That's incredible. Congratulations and welcome to a Bitcoin country. We're going to be talking about that today. I've got a special Moscow time for Bukele today. Huddle T, Washington. Good morning, Breakup Bitcoiners. Jose, ready for my daily dose of Moscow time. Hopefully we get some Phil Bump level fake news. We're going to get Phil Bump level, but I think Phil Bump gets weekends off, I think that's part of the contracting deal that when you're a fake news guy, because you don't always have to react to the news. You can make it up. It seems like Milei eliminated taxes on Bitcoin transactions. That's good news, Jose. I didn't notice that, but I noticed his sweeping bill made it through, which is a pretty good roadmap, pretty good modeling for America in the next cycle. Sun up, Bukele up, indeed. Jevy, what's up, my man? Minnesota Bitcoin crew checking in. Pamp it, Bitcoin Graffiti says. Jevy gets an extra hello from Edgar. Here we go. Good morning, Bitcoin Deb. Here we go. Good morning, Breakup crew. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Let's just acknowledge that the sun here on the Atlantic Ocean is up without any problems. We got no troubles at all. And Bitcoin's running. We're good, guys. We're good. We're doing great. Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. So let's get a quick palate cleanser here to get us going. This is just a funny headline. I don't even know if it's not fake, but it's just fun. This comes from the UK, comes from the Telegram. Nuclear missile found in U.S. man's garage. It's just funny. The news is funny. So, yes, apparently some guy in America had a nuke. He just had a nuke in his garage. Pretty good. Washington Post asks, this generation won't remember winter the way their parents do. It's going to be so different. This is also this one's from Climate California. So a lesser known news source, but they can produce fake news. Here's what they say. Opinion. Now, remember, this is not a Babylon Bee joke. Okay. These are real headlines. Remember, that's what Moscow time is all about. All right. That's what it's all about. Opinion. How throwing soup at the Mona Lisa can help fight climate change. So good. Fox News asks, Matt, that this is not the kind of, you can throw soup, better be vegetarian, right? That you throw the soup you throw at the Mona Lisa, because, if it's a beef soup or like a pork bone soup or, it's got greenhouse gas stuff. So it's not as good. And that's why Fox News is asking this question. They're saying, should American families really start eating lab-grown meat? What to know about this cultivated alternative? It's cultivated, guys. It's so cultivated. Now, you get all these stories about Taylor Swift being a deep state agent, right? Washington Post asks, Democrats are eager to catch some reflected light from the massive star, but using Taylor Swift's support to move votes could be tricky. Swift endorsement. It's delicate. I also find it funny if she does a line. Isn't it neat that one of the enemies of Bitcoin is literally Swift? Isn't that a simulation wink at us right now? Isn't it Swift? Isn't Swift like the problem? And now Taylor Swift is coming to join in politically. I don't think it could get better than this. I think it's perfect. I think it's absolutely perfect. Remember, Taylor Swift did help out in a Senate election in Tennessee a couple of years ago. I guess she's a bigger star now than then. I don't know. I mean, it's all about the same, right? It didn't work out for her then. So we'll see if it works out this time. Who knows? We're fans of Taylor Swift. We don't have a problem with her. This one's funny. So I got to read it out actually. I've actually got to read this one out, okay? Because it's not so simple. It comes from CNN, okay? So I'm gonna have to do 2 characters in order to make this make sense. But again, it's gonna be in the spirit of Moscow time. I'm not gonna add any context to this, right? So what happens here is that you've got a CNN set, the news set, and they bring a lawyer in, and the lawyer is talking about the crime, the petty crime in New York, and also the lack of it in Florida. So the hosts are, the fake news hosts. They're trying to sit serious, So tell me a little bit about the problem of crime in New York. Tell me about the crime, right? So this guy comes in and he says, what the detectives are telling me is that there are crews here that operate in New York, do all their stealing, then go back to Florida to spend the money, and then they come back. So the lawyer was explaining that to them. And then the journalist on CNN said, I'm like, what, they're asking what's going on, right? And then the lawyer says, I'm like, why don't they just stay and steal in Florida, right? So the lawyer asks one of the criminals, because he's so connected to it, right? He asks him, why don't you just stay? Why do you keep traveling between New York and Florida? Why don't you just stay and steal in Florida? And they said, because there you go to jail. And then the news people just say, huh. Huh. Because there you go to jail. It's too good. It's too good. Meanwhile, New York City, they're not so much worried about the parole, no bail, cash bail, what's going on with that, right? They're not. They got a plan, though. Here it is from the New York Post. NYPD to go old school by making crime illegal? No. Putting bail for violent criminals again? No. They're going to go old school by banning facial hair and changing uniforms. They're going to bring back some traditions, guys. Good for them. In other news in New York, they're launching a $53 million program to hand out prepaid credit cards to migrant families. It's perfect. New York, you're gonna get out of this no trouble. It's great. You're doing awesome. You are doing awesome, New York City. I'm not even a little bit upset I'm not living there anymore, right? It's just the best. All right. This one's pretty good too. Kamala Harris was giving a speech about the Justice Department, what's going on with the U.S. Justice Department. And she says that if Republicans gain power, they're going to weaponize the Department of Justice. Yeah. Thanks, Kamala. Thanks, Kamala. This one's pretty good too. This comes from NPC News, the one with the peacock, the NPC News. They say, as violent crime continues to rise in Washington, D.C., former President Trump, Republicans in Congress, and their allies are using the Capitol to portray the entire Democrat Party as soft on crime. It's too good. It's too good. And then we had an election in El Salvador, and the fake news had to cover it. So here's a special subsection of Moscow Time dedicated to the re-election of Nayib Bukele, a Bitcoiner, right? Who is now re-elected in El Salvador by the greatest margin of victory in a democratic election ever, apparently. Apparently, the record was something in Portugal in the 70s, and the guy won by some astronomical amount. I think Bukele won by like 86% or something like that. But be careful. The Economist writes, Nayib Bukele, El Salvador's president, has brought peace to a country previously terrorized by criminal gangs. But he has also used his crusade for public order as an excuse to move towards authoritarianism. Gangsters in El Salvador are terrified of Nayib Bukele. The country's president protects citizens from crime, but who will protect them from him? Thomas, who's going to protect you from Bukele? And they had 3 headlines on The Economist. So it was the gangsters in El Salvador are terrified of him. The president, then another one's calling it, this one's perfect, the mess messiahs make. They got an alliteration in there. You got to give them some credit. They got an alliteration. Mess messiah makes. Pretty good, huh? 3 M's. Not bad, not bad. Way to go, Economist. We get better, though. We got better here. This is from The Observer. El Salvador strongman Bukele eyes re-election. Never mind the Constitution. So he eyes re-election, but he's not eyeing the Constitution. We got it. We got it. This is good from CNN. Voting underway in El Salvador, where strongman president's victory is all but assured. ABC News. El Salvador votes in presidential election that the world's coolest dictator has clear path to win. He's the coolest dictator in the world, guys. And we got one, I think it's the last one. Yeah, we got one last one. Ready? Peace, tranquility, freedom. El Salvador looks set to re-elect popular dictator Bukele. There is an unfamiliar air of serenity in El Salvador's capital, where voters head to the polls Sunday without the specter of gang violence and intimidation hanging over them for the first time in years. Well, Bukele won. Didn't we all knew that was going to happen? We all knew that was going to happen. But you can now add the whole Bukele thing into the massive list of hoaxes and scams that the mainstream media has been running. I mean, this should be obvious, and I think it is. I saw Nick Carter commenting it on this weekend. A lot of Bitcoiners who could have previously been confused as liberals got a real eye-opening experience to how fake the news is with the Bukele thing. It's just one of those examples, right? It's just one of those examples where you look at it and you might have been like, oh, I'm a Democrat, and I also like Bitcoin, and El Salvador is cool because it's the global South. And then all of a sudden they're running hit pieces on him because he's a dictator and a strong man and all that. And it makes you consider again just how much the mainstream media is now repelling people. It's not so much attracting them anymore, right? What we think of as the force necessary for centralization, right? The forces that made centralized government make sense in World War II. Those forces generally had a lot of people saying, yeah, give these centralized authorities more power and it'll work out because we need security here and we need safety there. And now that the mainstream media has gotten so confused and lies so much and has such a track record of getting things totally wrong and never going back and fixing them and never admitting they're wrong, what that ends up happening, what the effect of that ends up being, is that its ability to attract new people to its movements are lost, right? It doesn't really have that attraction anymore. Vivek put out his list. He says, the mainstream media lies like it's their profession, yet the abysmal failure of their business model suggests it's not even in their best interest anymore. Makes you think. And he puts a list: Russia collusion, Hunter Biden laptop, Charlottesville, Bubba Wallace, Juicy Smollett, Covington Catholic students, Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, COVID lab leak was a conspiracy theory, Steve Steele dossier, don't say gay was in the bill, migrant kids in cages, Georgia election integrity was the new Jim Crow, Duke lacrosse kids, January 6 video footage, peaceful BLM riots, ivermectin is a horse dewormer, Trump used tear gas to clear a crowd for a Bible photo. The list goes on and on and on. It's not enough, though. It's just not enough. There's way more to it. And the consistency of this and how predictable it is means that we can call it before it comes. Remember, I was telling you we were going to get fake news Bukele last week. I said we would have a dedicated fake news Moscow time to Bukele last week. Now, I'm not a genius for predicting this. It's not like anyone could have seen this, right? It's not hard to imagine they're going to be doing it. But the amount of times they get it wrong, the amount of times they have to go backtrack and fix everything. Just look at the Fani Willis case. Fani Willis is so funny how much of a failure this thing is. Remember the 4 cases that are almost impossible to keep in your mind, the Trump cases? They're all gone now, by the way. Everything, all the Trump legal stuff is basically gone, right? So you got the E. Jean Carroll thing. They got the money, but it's over. They've had to drop the boxes hoax, right? The Jack Smith boxes hoax, the Mar-a-Lago one in DC, that's off the calendar. So it's not going to be heard in March. It's not going to be heard before the election. So the boxes hoax is over. The other one, Fani Willis, Fani, who'd been banging her lawyer that she laundered money through, and it was caught, right? You get media, CNN here now, rebuking Fani Willis. They're actually rebuking Fani Willis for playing the victim. And they say that the whole case might run aground because Fani Willis couldn't help but bang her lawyer friend, who she's now admitted that it happened, right? But it was worse than that. She was laundering money through the COVID thing, and she's on audio getting caught admitting she did it and then firing the person. So it couldn't be better. Like, Fani Willis is a gift. She's a gift. We wouldn't be having as much fun laughing. I mean, Jack Straw's one case. He's a blackmailer. He's got that, Jack Smith serious face all the time. Alvin Bragg, E. Jean Carroll is funny enough. It's funny enough, but it's not quite at the level of hilarity like Fani Willis. Fani Willis is in another planet as far as making this stuff fun. And here's what you got to deal with, right? Can the mainstream media, it can't even get people aligned on Fani Willis. You've even got CNN going against that case now, admitting that the sad part is not even that Fani Willis cheated everybody. It's that she ran the case aground against Trump. So now you've got to deal with Fani Willis and this whole story versus Trump, who remains one of the most persuasive people in the world. This is what he wrote. He goes, Fani Willis, the DA of Fulton County, just admitted to having a sexual relationship with the prosecutor she, in consultation with the White House and DOJ, appointed to get President Donald J. Trump. By going after the most high-level person and the Republican nominee, she was able to get her lover much more money, almost $1 million, than she would be able to get for the prosecution for any other person or individual. That means this scam is totally discredited and over, which I think is the case. I can't imagine the Fani Willis thing can go any further, right? So Fani has absolutely given us a gift here. And the gift she's given us helps bring this system of media that is repelling us and making us disgusted from the systems that are managing America and are at the heart of America, versus so we have the disgust thing, right, where we're running away from these people, versus the centralizing thing, which has to attract people. It's got to be attractive. You've got to want to go there. You've got to want to join this thing, right? You've got to want to see it as a deliverer of security, a deliverer of wealth, health, whichever. But they're abdicating any potential ability to be attractive, to gather more people to their cause. I mean, they can keep cheating, right? Now, this was dealt with in, or was at least discussed in terms of what's going on with the border bill, right? So the border bill just came out, and we see all kinds of bullshit with Mayorkas. And so here's what we know. The Senate released the draft bill at $118 billion. But here's the kicker. 60 billion goes to Ukraine, 14 to Israel, but only 20 for the US border. So of course, everyone is saying this is ridiculous. It's not going to pass. It's not going to happen. And now, of course, you get the whole thing where, oh, it's Republicans. This is the best border bill. David Frum, right? He goes, this is the toughest border bill we've ever had. And everyone keeps reminding the media and Biden, you don't need a bill. You can go and do this stuff. You don't, reminding Mayorkas, who's getting impeached. You don't need this, right? So a lot of people bringing that up today. We've got Marshall Hayner saying, if you want to keep the U.S. border safe, you have to send money to Ukraine and Israel first. Makes sense, right? People picking up what's wrong with the bill itself. Stephen Miller writes, perhaps the most devastating provision in the bill, Mayorkas can directly grant illegals asylum in a special new process. Asylum status confers welfare access, green cards, chain migration, and a path to voting citizenship. David Sachs writes, the Inflation Reduction Act was actually a $1 trillion spending bill. Border security bill is mass amnesty. Just assume bills do the opposite of what they say. Secretary Mayorkas actually comes out and makes a Twitter thread supporting his bill. And Emma Jo Morris, a Montrealer who was the woman who broke the Hunter Biden laptop story, says kiss of death. Of course. I mean, Mayorkas repels people. He's disgusting. So there's no way he's going to have the clout to push this thing through, right? You've got people bringing up the actual provisions, the problems with them. Here's one representative, Republican rep in the House, saying all challenges to the statute or any policy guideline or procedure Mayorkas sees fit to issue will be heard exclusively by the federal district court in the swamp. Tough orders from federal district courts in Texas and Florida will be no more. So they're just going to try and adjudicate everything in DC with the jury pools that they control. So that's not going to work. It's not going to work. So meanwhile, you've got all this stuff about the elections, but you also had this very weekend. Elon Musk going into how the point of illegal immigration is to have bodies in place to vote in order to scam the election in the autumn. He's saying replacement theory is a real thing, right? And now everyone's saying it's not a real thing. But again, it just doesn't matter, because what you're going to find is a group of people cannot get any attractive incentive to get more people to support this publicly and whatever. You're seeing African Americans in cities in Chicago screaming and yelling, in Boston and in New York City saying, and with reason, these are people that are having to work 2-3 jobs in order to keep going. If you saw the jobs bill, for example, on Friday, all these jobs were added. Well, what were they? I mean, they're not really telling you. It was all second jobs. It was all extra jobs. It was all part-time work. It was all people just trying to make ends meet. Not necessarily, we added all these new jobs. It didn't look like that. It looked a little more, looked like some of the worst news you could find, as far as I could tell. Now, again, we don't trust any of the numbers, right? We can't trust the numbers coming out of these people in any event. So, and you could have predicted you'd have had a good jobs report in an election year, that's for sure. But now that we're getting to this point with Ukraine and the border, Cernovich writes the following. He says, my sense of Ukraine is the American people didn't fall for the hoaxes. The regime is at a level of power now where they don't need to hoax the public into conflict, as with the Iraq wars. They stole the money and said, be glad you're not in prison like a January 6er. Scott Adams wrote to that saying the regime doesn't care about 1/3 of the public that figured it out because the other 2/3 have no contact with them. So what he's saying here is that the fault tolerance of the fiat system, of the US dollar system, of what we got, and by fault tolerance, I mean the ability for it to propagate forward, right? Fault tolerance is a consensus concept when it comes to public shared ledgers like Bitcoin, right? The fault tolerance of Bitcoin is 51%. It can tolerate 49% of nodes lying, right? That's why it's called a 51% attack. And that's why Satoshi called it that in the white paper, right? How do you break Bitcoin? You get a 51% attack. That's its vulnerability, which everyone has known from day one, right? But that's what's impossible to even get to. So the fault tolerance of Bitcoin is 49%. I've been arguing for a long time that the fiat structure, which has nodes and a propagation protocol like Bitcoin, you have to think of it as a propagation protocol, just like Bitcoin. It's one of the good things that Saifedean did in his book, The Fiat Standard, is that he used Bitcoin as the organizing principle to explain fiat, which is actually a better way to explain fiat. And the propagation of fiat is by credentialism, by centralized nodes that help steer the network forward to more and future consensus. So when it can't do that, when it can't attract enough people, and when the motivation of that network is to demand for more centralized authority so that the network can propagate forward, it can't propagate forward if news and information and military and other things are decentralized. They have to be centralized. The point of the fiat system has been to centralize power within Washington, D.C., type institutions for a generation now, or several generations. We've been doing it since before World War II. That was the arc of history. That was the trend. And it was to centralize these things, centralizing media, centralizing military decision-making capacity, industrial business models, all that kind of stuff. So now that we're at this point where Scott Adams is saying the regime doesn't care, it doesn't care, because the fault tolerance, what he's saying is the fault tolerance of 1/3 of the network not propagating for the fiat industrial complex, for the NPCs that are motivating this thing to go forward, and the people who program and prompt engineer those NPCs. So that piece, he's saying it's 1/3 and they don't care because they don't interact. But it's not exactly true. So I disagree with him here in the sense that I think 1/3 is too great of a fault tolerance for the system to perpetuate forward. It can't gather more steam. It can't get more people other than by force. And every day you get more and more people leaving the plantation, if you will, and understanding that what's being sold in terms of health, wealth is a no-go. It's not, you're not getting it. You're not getting the results. And at a certain point, you can't ignore that any longer. So you're getting more and more people opening their mind up to that. And even if what Scott Adams and Cernovich are saying here, that they don't care and they'll stomp on your neck and give you the boot, that might be true. It might be true. But again, the ability to centralize these forces is gone, and its ability to track new people is gone. And when you start to go into things like this Tucker Carlson interview with the big pharma person. So Tucker Carlson this weekend did an interview with a pharma person, right? And they were talking about the pharma's corruption of media, right? Pharma's corruption of media. And so Vigilant Fox did a write-up. He goes, holy smokes, suspicions confirmed. Former pharma insider tells Tucker Carlson the true goal of pharma ads on TV is not to sell drugs, but to buy off the news media. This is described as an open secret within the pharmaceutical industry. So the context here is that every ad you see on pharmaceuticals, on news, mainstream news, is pharma, right? If you go onto Fox or CNN, it's 9 doctors out of 10 recommend, blah, 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 blah. Side effects may include, right? That whole thing. That there are nonstop, beginning of the commercial break to the end. And Tucker asked this guy, his name is Callie Means. He says, you're saying that pharma buys TV spots not to convince people to ask for specific drugs from their physicians, but to subvert the news business. Callie Means says, this is an open secret working for pharma. Tucker, I never thought of that. Callie Means says, this is an open secret working for pharma. This is an open secret. The kind of silly ads you see between the news breaks, the point of that is not, it's largely to impact the customer. It's not to largely impact the customer. The pharma has already got that. They've already bought off the doctors. They're good on that. No, this is the open secret. The news ad spending from pharma is a public relations lobbying tactic, essentially to buy off the news. They're not investigating pharma. The news has become basically a referee. That you are a terrible anti-science Luddite for asking why the shots that we require our kids to get, that fundamentally by their own advertising change their immune system of that child for life. To even ask that question, the news referees that and calls you anti-science. The news referees that and calls you anti-science. When the 2 largest vaccine makers in the country are literally criminal enterprises, GlaxoSmithKline and Merck, in the past 5 years have settled 2 of the largest criminal penalties in American corporate history for bribing doctors and creating misleading research for the largest 2 vaccine makers. So you literally have the media playing a referee that you can't even ask a question. Tucker says, if you have a vaccine injury, and many people have, including some I know very well, even a profound vaccine injury, you're not allowed to complain about it. No, you're anti-science, Tucker. That's Callie Means says. Even if it can be shown to us that it is a vaccine injury, Tucker says. The media plays referee because they're funded by on all many levels. And so this is sort of a dark thing, right? And it is pretty dark to hear it explained like that, to hear the news media described as a completely captured entity of an industry, which I think all of us have understood for a long time now. Not everyone is getting it. But what I'm talking about is here, not convincing people of that or whatever. What I'm doing is predicting what happens as I see their ability to continue to put people and hypnotize people with this idea is diminishing. So the centralizing force to get more people to trust the media, to get more people to trust big pharma, is in a free fall. As far as I can tell, it's in a free fall. You're starting to see more and more people question this stuff, more and more people just not interested in following these things, more and more people saying that the news media lying about these things is now so obvious to people and so true that it's not even coming into a debate amongst normal Americans. Most people see it, and the ones who don't, the ones who still think that the pharmaceutical companies and the media are doing a good job, right? That number is just going down little by little. Little by little, they're losing steam, losing power every single day. And I don't see them replacing those people. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say here is the ability, the other replacement theory. How do you replace people who have woken up? It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. Confusing people and confusing people who are already confused, not so hard. Confusing people who have woken up a little bit, much harder, much harder. So, and here's a prediction on where this pharma media journalism thing is headed, because Tucker Carlson's next interview, right? Tucker Carlson has been spotted in Moscow today. He's in Moscow today. A lot of people saying that the follow-up to this pharma interview is going to be him interviewing Putin. Now, here's what I predict they're going to talk about. Here's what I think is going to be the biggest news out of that interview. You're going to hear all kinds of shit about America did this, America did that. That's all going to be slightly conjecture, right? We can't always trust what Putin says, right? We're not here saying Putin is telling you the truth. Putin is also a manipulator, a psyop advocate. That's what he does, right? So, but here's the thing. So he's going to try a bunch of that stuff on Tucker. He's going to say stuff about America, say stuff about the American military. Some might be true, some might be false. I don't know, right? I don't know. But here's one thing that we know is going to be true, and I think is going to get a lot of attention, and I think is going to lead to a lot of understanding about what's wrong with America. And here it is. So, and so here's a part of the conversation I'm predicting we're going to be talking about here on the breakup this week when Putin and Tucker sit down. They're going to be talking about the frozen Russian money, the frozen Russian US dollars. And this is going to be a little different than all the other PSYOP stuff, right? When they start talking about that. So I think that you're going to hear Putin warn about what's going on with the money that was seized, because there's rumors once this border bill fails that we talked about earlier, Ukraine's not getting another dollar. There's no more money going over there, right? So there's no more money going over. And by the way, do you know that they originally here's what David Sachs says, right? It's amazing to think that the idea of packaging border security with Ukraine aid was originally to attract Republican votes. So their trick didn't work, right? You can't tie these things together every time. And it's something that we've been tracking here on the breakup for a long time, getting rid of omnibus spending, getting rid of these attached bills that put money on one side and the other. If you do this, you do that. If one thing's you don't want to do it, it's okay because you're getting what you want here. So we've been talking about the power of the purse for a long time and how important it is to break it up. And now that you see Republicans who just don't want to give any money to Ukraine, nothing, zero. I think that's going to stick. And so you're going to hear more about that. And one of the things I think that's going to happen as a result is that the Americans are going to start arguing that they're going to give Ukraine the Russian money that they seized, which we want to happen. Okay, we want them to give them that money. Why? Putin is going to talk about that with Tucker Carlson this week. It might be the most watched interview of all time. It might beat the Millet interview, for example. And here's what they're going to talk about, right? So the Kremlin warned about it today. They said on Monday that if the West attempts to use frozen Russian assets as collateral to raise funds for Ukraine, it would be illegal and lead to years of litigation because Moscow would challenge any such action. but so what? The Financial Times reported on Saturday that the G7 had drawn up plans to use frozen Russian assets as collateral for debt sold to help Ukraine. We do not know how much these publications correspond to reality. Are there really such plans? It is important to wait for official statements on this matter, said the Kremlin spokesperson. I think it's going to happen. And if it happens, it's the end. It really is going to be the rocket fuel they needed over on the BRIC side and in many other places. Watching America fail, they will fail. It won't work, right? They're going to collateralize, try and buy some weapons for Ukraine with the money they stole from Russia. But the net result of that is going to be what we can all predict is obvious. You're going to get more people saying, get out of Dodge. We're not following this stuff. You're going to get more people saying and arguing that this seizure of money could be anyone next. So the centralizing forces, remember, America needs to attract help. No one's going to help after this. Nobody. France and the other stupid countries, right? Germany. But the other coherent countries, India's not going to like this. Right? Brazil, Argentina are not going to like this. Now, I get it. If you add up all the G7 countries, it's still barely the same as if you add up all the BRICS countries, it's not even more than the G7. But that doesn't really matter. The system doesn't work if this much of it fails. It has to be entirely centralized. There can't really be two. And the minute there's two, you have a way to bet against the other system. So I think that's where it's headed. And I think what we're going to see is all kinds of talk about the plans for this money. I think Putin is going to use the occasion. Putin already knew the money was gone, and I believe they've made more money with the trouble since the war and have sort of de-risked themselves from American control. So I don't think they can be bullied into this. So if they can't be bullied into this, then they have a free hand to play. And I believe he's, of course, willing. What is it, a 20 billion, 30 billion, something? I don't remember the exact amount, or 200 billion or something like that. I don't remember the exact amount that was taken, but I think Putin is ready to sacrifice it, right? I think it's worth sacrificing in the sense that a casualty of the war is probably the US dollar. So what are you really getting rid of? The case is better for Putin if they take the money, because he can sort of use that for his own marketing and his own persuasion. But again, here's a perfect example of, and I think this says everything about where we're headed. Okay. I think this says everything about where America is, where Russia is, where Bitcoiners are. And it's about the centralizing versus repelling, right? Again, the system must attract people in order for it to propagate forward. The fault tolerance of the fiat industrial complex is not 1/3. It's much, much lower, right? I think it can only handle like 10%. Not what we're seeing now, not what Scott Adams said, not what Cernovich said. Now, I get what they're saying, that it doesn't matter 1/3 and 2/3 never hear them, and so they still have a majority and it's enough. And if 1/3 of the people know the truth, but 2/3 don't, it's enough because of democracy and 50%. But again, you're losing every minute. There's no more argument for centralization. They can try the fear thing. Oh, you're in danger, right? Everyone get together and we'll protect you. That worked a few times ago. It's starting to lose its capacity. COVID sort of vaccinated us from that argument to begin with. So, but here's a perfect example, right? Here's a perfect example. And it goes back to a Moscow time that I was bringing up all last summer. So, in the summer, we don't have a ton of news content because everyone is on vacation. So you get a lot of extra fake news time, a lot of extra Moscow time. So I covered the Rich Men North of Richmond, right? Remember the song Richmond North of Richmond? I predicted that would become a huge Moscow time source. And indeed, there was a million articles written about it, right? The other one, don't try that in a small town, right? I wrote, don't try that in a Bitcoin citadel once as a headline. So I knew there would be a lot of music-related fake news last summer. And indeed, there was another one on Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, the song. You know, Tracy Chapman, who's great, right? But if you remember last summer when they only had the low IQ journalists, the even lower than Phil Bump and these people, and they were writing all these articles because someone covered Tracy Chapman's song last summer for the country charts, and it hit number one. So a viral fake news story had the New York Times saying Tracy Chapman, you know, because of racism in her time, never had a chance to have a number one hit like this. And everyone reminded her, I think it was like the most sold album of the 80s, or at least in the top 5 of the 80s. She was number one on the charts forever. The album was so popular, she never really even had to write another one, even though she did, you know, in the 90s. She's only done like 2 or 3 albums, right? But it was such a, like, every song, I can remember my parents listening to it all the time. We had the record, my parents would put it on, we'd listen to it. If it was on the radio, my parents would turn it up, they listened to it at parties, and my parents were boomer type people, right? That's what boomers did. They would get together and put albums on and sit around a table and let their kids go crazy. So that, I mean, a million times I heard that album growing up, and my parents would love it. And I remember when she came back out with her Give Me One Reason song, it was popular again with all kinds of young people. You know, I was a teenager and I was like, I've known her forever, since my whole life. So last night, now remember, they ran a bunch of bullshit fake stories forever, right? She would never have made it. It's the country people. They don't like her. So last night they had the Grammys, right? They had the Grammys last night. And at the Grammys, you had all kinds of people having a good time and singing. And you had an amazing moment. You had Tracy Chapman and the fella who covered it singing together. They sang together, and the audience went nuts. They loved it. Cernovich had a really great quote about it. Let me find it. Cernovich said, oh yeah, Killer Mike got arrested after the show. Dragged him out. Pretty good stuff. Let me find the Cernovich one. It was such a good quote, and it's about our theme today, so that's why I want to do it. So he says, here's what he says. I thought I had this. Oh, yeah, here it is. So I guess his name is Luke Combs. So, and I listened to it. I would never listen to an awards show, but it was just sort of, people were sampling it and putting it on X last night. And I was like, wow, that's really great. I didn't even know she was doing it. So the Grammys, no one watched it. Terrible ratings again. But this song is getting a lot of resonation. And here's what John, so sorry, it wasn't Cernovich who tweeted this. It was John Ocasio Rodham Nolte. Funny name. Ocasio Rodham, you know, Rodham Ocasio. So Tracy Chapman is all class, and that is still a great song. Here's what he says. Our awards shows always were once like this, bringing us together instead of tearing us apart. This moment is as America as it gets. Yeah, Luke Combs is the country guy. Yeah. So seeing that song, and indeed remembering when things like the Grammys would bring people together, there is a thirst out there to bring people together. There's a ton of it. You see it in Bitcoiners. We love getting together, right? You see it in El Salvador. You see Bitcoiners going here and there. No one wants all this fighting. No one wants all this division. And it's only coming from one place. It's coming from the PSYOP people who realize now that they cannot bring us together, because that would limit their ability to run the show. They have to divide. Now, remember, their whole system is predicated on them bringing people together. That's what made it work in the first place. After World War II, during World War II, there was a reason to centralize media, military, decision-making, DC, all of these things. It made sense. And you became healthier and wealthier because of it. Now, all of that is gone. The reasons why the centralizing forces would grow in power have been replaced. Now they must divide people to maintain their central hegemony. That's not the same architecture. That's not the same motivation. That's not the same system as it was 80 or 90 years ago. It's a completely inverted system. So the reason I bring this up and the reason I bring it up to the Tracy Chapman thing is because indeed, if the Grammys, right, still had the capacity to bring people together like that, if that was still the instinct to bring people together, if the news, if Phil Bump, if NBC, if any of these people were motivated to bring people together, then I would be worried about Bitcoin going forward. I would say, well, we have a viable alternative system that's already entrenched, that's producing results, that's out there trying to make people healthier, wealthier. But we don't have that. We don't have a system that is at all designed to keep you informed, to keep you healthy, to keep you wealthy. It's the opposite now. Entropy has set into the system and it is finished. It is dead. It is without capacity, without gas, and it can't keep doing this. It can only lose people. That's it. That's it. It can't gain anyone. And it will lose people every single day. And now that we're here, now that we're at this precipice, now that we're seeing just one example of how things used to be before the media got us divided on every single issue, a country music song reminded us that we're much more powerful together. Those things that bring us together are still there. They're still there. They're without the interference of the fake news, they will find themselves naturally. What kind of a world are you suggesting that Tracy Chapman wouldn't have been welcome with country music fans even in the 80s? It's fine. There was never that. We never lived on that planet. We didn't, right? Maybe 100 years ago, and even then I doubt it. So the story going forward is going to continue to be these people being so repulsive, inducing so much disgust that any argument for centralization is going to be gone. And the Putin thing is going to help us understand that central banks, right, that centralizing force, that's where it all led. All that centralizing force all led towards central banks. And we luckily have someone like Bukele now who is elected again. He's not going anywhere. And he's going to be able to make the case for no central bank, that centralizing force is gone. And I think it's going to definitely start this week at a much higher level. What I see happening this week is you're going to start to see widespread criticism of central banking around the world at a scale we've never seen before because of this Putin interview. You're going to hear people like David Sachs and Elon Musk and others who have never done this before. They've never started talking about the dollar. The dollar is going to become super politicized this week because the dollar and central banking has been the missing piece when we talk about centralizing fake media and centralizing military decision-making. The missing piece of the actual conversation in the world has been the money one, the central bank, the centralizing forces that the banks induce. And with Russia this week, it's the same story as the corruption of the media. It's the same story as the corruption of our military, of our legal system, of our governance systems, all of that. All those corruption stories are going to gain a new perspective this week as we start to understand the corruption of central banks. And to have all these people that are out here commenting on all these individual issues every day and winning, the Kaneko of the greats, the Mike Cernoviches, the Scott Adams, all of these people that are taking direct aim and destroying important propagating nodes in the fiat system, the media and the military and the decision-making process. All of that getting absolutely tagged. Now, the force that gathers all of these into one conversation is money. And we're going to finally get to that point. So remember, 2024 is nothing but fun. We're going to get more fun. More fun. We love more fun. So that's why our theme today is fast cars and a plan to get us out of here, right? We're going to be talking about these incentive systems and everything. Now, let me get to the Rumble comments and see if I missed anything. I hope you all had a good weekend, by the way. I had a little bit of an injury this weekend, so I'm kind of limping. Just a little tightness in my and my Achilles, weirdly. All right. French fry. Good morning from the free state of Florida. Let's break this shit up. We love it. Good afternoon from a Sweden, Portugal. Great, Sluggo. Are you going to talk about Tucker and Russia today? I did, Sluggo. We're going to wait for the real stuff. But my prediction is indeed one thing that we're going to be seeing this week. They're going to have a whole bunch of stuff that we have all heard. It's going to be filled with Putin propaganda. Be careful. People are going to fight about it. It's not true. Tucker shouldn't have talked to him. Blah, 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 blah. But the interesting piece, the piece that's actually going to change global dialogue is going to be the money piece, right? The money piece is going to be big. There might be other stuff. I don't know. Right? It's hell growing old, Nolan. Yeah, it's not fun, CB. Yeah, it was. Don't know what it was. I mean, literally, I was walking over. There's a rocky part of the beach shore. My wife and I go on walk dates on the weekend. So we were on a walk date. We walk up the coast, and it was just one part. I was just pausing. When I got off, it just wasn't working the same, and no acute injury at any point, just tight. So, and it's, Achilles, you don't want to, with you being in a warm climate now, it's better for your recovery from whatever injury. Feel better. Yeah, I took it easy yesterday. I didn't do anything. I just didn't do any beach, no gym, and be out a week. I haven't got to that point yet, but it's getting there. But I'm not I work out every day, but I don't kill myself. I do like 20 minutes of weightlifting maybe. And then I do, a 1 mile run. That's about my daily workout. So, but it's a good one. Future Hoddle says a permanent underclass to maintain the fault tolerance. Therefore, an open border. Yeah, I think that's the plan. Roy, do you think there is a danger of going into Bitcoin exceptionalism? I get the feeling when I go on Noster. Antonopoulos had a good point regarding when the 3,000-pound bear get angry. We all know. Yeah. No, I don't think there's anything. The only problem, I guess, is that some Bitcoiners miss. You don't want to be in an echo chamber in any case, but I think the Bitcoin. I mean, it's not about exceptionalism. It's about not getting. It's about understanding we are all easily persuaded. We'll all believe our own biases, right? We'll all get tricked by our own biases. Look at the excess death stories that you hear everywhere. Okay, now hold on for a second, okay? Because I'm going to tell you something that might bother you, but just understand what I'm saying, okay? And this comes with Bitcoiners and being able to exist within a world where not everyone's a Bitcoiner versus staying on our own bubble. So you hear all these stories about excess death stuff, right? Yeah, I'm a big knees over toe guy. Big, Sergio. Huge. I do that. That's part of my workout every day. Lots of knees over toes. And it was, I don't know what it was yesterday. It's just a weird thing, or 2 days ago. So, here's the vaccine thing, right? You hear all these stories these days about excess death, excess mortality since the vaccination thing, right? You hear from everywhere. Like everyone's convinced, everybody, right? So obviously it was the vaccines, right? Well, careful who you're listening to here. The insurance companies, right? Don't forget, they would love mysterious, unknown excess death. Right? That's a way to charge more money for premiums. So you got to follow the money. I don't know anything about the vaccines. I wouldn't be surprised if they caused the excess death. I wouldn't be surprised. But if you were following the money with an insurance company, it is not in their best interest to make a story about excess death being related to the vaccines. It's excess death out of nowhere, right? Out of nowhere. So it doesn't mean the vaccines did it. It doesn't. It just doesn't. Now, it could be. I'm not saying it's you can rule it out, right? But remember that their benefit is to be talking about a world with excess death that no one can explain. That's how they make money. right? What's going on? Charge you more money. So, um, so here, let me just get your question again to make sure I'm answering it correctly. So the Bitcoin exceptionalism piece here is that we're all easily prompt engineered. And if you're not exposing yourself to all kinds of stuff, it'll happen to you. You've basically got to give yourself cognitive dissonance every day and work through it in order to survive entirely and thrive in this environment. Now, I believe we are at a critical enough number for Bitcoiners that we could probably just defect, not care, and the rest of the world will catch up to us. I think that's possible. But, I've heard lots of Bitcoiners, and I know a lot of them, right? Rich, tons of Bitcoin, ready to check out, just want to disappear, gulch it. And I know a lot of people have done that already, right? They gulched it, and you don't even hear them anymore. They're not involved in the world. They're just sitting on their stack waiting for it to go one way or the other. But here's the thing. There is no hiding place from the collective unconscious. It's a vibe. It's around. You can go on any island. I've done it. I've seen what it's like. I could have disappeared a couple years ago. I was ready to, right? But the elections and then the stuff, and I said, where am I going to go? Like, what am I going to do here? And then I'm a terrorist within a couple weeks. Where am I going to go? Right? So it's not so much to defend myself, it's that there is no hiding place from this stuff. You could go live in a citadel now, but the planet is going through this and the vibe is everywhere. So I don't know if you can hide from the collective unconscious. I'm not sure. I don't think you can. I don't think that's possible. So if we go on to Noster and these other places all the time, that's a risk. And we want to be exposed to the fiat. Remember, it's not. Here's something for all of us to remember. Bitcoin is not going to become the reserve currency in the world because a bunch of plebs love Bitcoin. That's not going to be what does it. We're lucky that we're here first, okay? But the real thrust of people joining Bitcoin is because the fiat system collapses. It's not the same thing. That's not. I'm telling you that they can't attract new people and they repel people. Repelling people is everything because they'll repel people to a new system. It's not because Bitcoin is going to attract all these people. That's not exactly how it works. They're free radicals after they've been unshackled from the fiat system. And like in any chemical reaction, they've got to land somewhere. They've got to satisfy that lack, right? The ionized lack that they have, the negative charge that they're being released with. They're being released with a negative charge. So it's all chemistry and physics in the end, right? And so they'll simply attach to Bitcoin because there's no other way to go. They'll attach to what we've already built. But it's not because we reach some democratic level of Bitcoin saturation that we win. I don't believe that's the path. I never have, right? I've never believed that's the path. I've always believed that as a virus proceeds, we'll pick off more and more exceptional people, exceptional industries, and will cripple the fiat system. And therefore, the fiat system will start barfing up assets and we'll just continue to grab those. And by assets, I mean human beings, right? So you're just going to see it. I think you're still, you want to hear, I'll let you know, this was a sort of a public conversation. So I don't mind sharing it. It was not offered in complete privacy, and it's mostly beneficial to the person who made the prediction, so I'll share it with you. But it was my last meeting with Barry Silbert just after I had been bought out of CoinDesk in 2019. And so we're heading into COVID, right? So he predicts, so Barry Silbert at this point, it's him and a few of us in his office in Manhattan talking, and he says to me, because we're just talking about predictions. It's just before Christmas time, 2019. So just before COVID, he predicts the following. The next years are going to be the worst in the fiat system because it's dying. It's going to collapse. And what it's going to do is it's going to spit up assets and things nonstop. It's not going to be able to keep a hand on anything. And everything that it has amassed until now will simply fall apart. Here's the perfect example, right? I forgot to get to this one today. Let me get my album out. And here's where you're going to find it. Here's where things are going to head, right? You've got the story on housing in America. Here it is. So 44% of all single family home purchases in 2023 were by private equity firms. 44%. BlackRock. They're creating a world where ownership is impossible. You want to know why you can't buy a house? Because they're being bought up by BlackRock. Travis in Flint writes, this is causing a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class to the top 100%. Home ownership is one of the best ways to build wealth for a family, and they are taking that away from most people. We need to demand the limits on the number of homes that funds the BlackRock. Anyway, Travis, you're wrong. We don't need a limit on what BlackRock can buy. That's not going to get us there. They'll scam you. You actually need to blow up the system, and you have to destroy the concept that homes are where you should put your savings. I mean, it's an absolutely crazy idea. So this is the health and wealth thing, right? The fiat system simply doesn't offer health and wealth. People want health and wealth. They want safety, health, and wealth. And that prioritization is going to cause a lot of people, because they're not going to get it from this, they're going to defect, and they're not coming back ever. You're never going to be able to convince them again. And here's this is something I read from Terence McKenna this week, and I think it summarizes exactly what happened with this inversion that Barry Silbert explained to me in that last meeting, right? So Barry's explanation of what was going to happen was you're going to get years of all of these fiat monsters dying, puking up assets, not understanding what the price of anything is, right? He predicted a price confusion around homes, assets, everything that isn't Bitcoin. That was his prediction to us, right? That everything would become mispriced and we wouldn't understand how to price anything. Now, this is 2019. He's telling us all this stuff, right? I've emailed him and seen him since, but this was our last sort of where I can even get inside information, because I was still sort of a part of the leadership of the company. So it was very interesting and completely accurate predictions, right? Completely accurate. Despite all the trouble he got himself into afterwards, he was totally right about that. It was the strange pricing models, and that nothing would make sense pricing wise. I hadn't even thought of that, the way he described it, right? And what it ends up looking like is there's no ability to get any gauge on if you're wealthy, if you're healthy, if you're doing well in the fiat system. So that's what's about. And so the only way forward is that BlackRock holds the bag, which is the perfect soft landing for a housing crisis. It sounds like bad news. It sounds like bad news that BlackRock is buying all the houses. It's not. It's excellent news. It couldn't be better, because in the end, they're going to be left with the bag. They are going to be left with the bag, which is funny. And then the houses will just be. So his prediction of what was exactly this was going to happen. And then once they start suffering, they just puke stuff up, and they don't know how to price, and they don't care anymore about the price. They'll just give it to you. That's what's going to happen to houses in America, for sure. That's how I see it. That's how what's going to happen in Canada when they don't have 1 million immigrants who want to come to our shitty universities anymore. What's going to happen to the houses? They're going to be free. There's no one who's going to want to live in Canada if there's no more credentialism. Well, you can go for the summer, I guess. That's fun. But do you want to go live in Canada? Have you guys been there? It's fucking crazy. It's freezing. It's great if you grew up there and you like it, but it's not going to be this thing where you have 10 million square miles of territory, the second largest country in the world, and a 1,000 square foot apartment is $2 million. That's not going to keep it. That's not going to stay. That's not going to stay, right? So here's Terence McKenna on just how bad things have gotten, and more or less what Bitcoin is going to do to change things, right? Here's what it sounds like. Assets don't have high maintenance costs like houses do. Exactly. Yeah. Now, you need a place to live. I'm not saying housing can be free, but it's not going to be your number one financial consideration in your life. That's not it, right? It's going to be like, what kind of car do I buy? Like, it's going to be that dramatic of a situation, nothing less than that, right? Oh, I couldn't afford the really nice view. It's not going to be what it is today, right? Here's what Terence McKenna says. He goes, people were created to be loved. Things were created to be used. The reason the world is in chaos is because things are being loved and people are being used. And that's really the inversion we've had with the fiat system, right? That people are being used and things are being loved. Things like houses, things like all these assets. That's where we're headed. We're headed back to money being simple, right? We love we're not changing human nature here, guys. Humans will always love money, right? Bitcoin is not going to change that. Bitcoin is just going to align that properly. You should love money. There's not this we're God made us this way. We're clearly baked to love money. Okay, there's no way around it. We love it. We love time. That's our finite resources. Time is money. They're the same thing. So we love those things, and that's not going to change. That's one of the very Jesus Christ things that Satoshi did. He loves us as we are, warts and all, selfish, greedy, all of it. It's great. Satoshi doesn't ask us to change any of that. There is no discipline required for a Bitcoin standard to go forward because it gets into your subconscious, because it does actually reprogram your reality. It's not a like I'm disciplined now, I have Bitcoin and we are on a Bitcoin standard because we're all literate and smart and logical beings. That's not it. That's not how we're going forward. We're going forward as the selfish fuckers we are. All right. That's it. But indeed, if the money perverts things and the information economy perverts things so much that you are in a position where you're using people and loving things because it's not even money anymore, then you get to this situation. So we're going to win, guys. We're going to win. We're almost there. Almost there. All right. That's all I got for today, you guys. I shall see you all tomorrow. Have a great day.